So 40 years ago, I was practicing law with my father, doing estate planning and business planning. I graduated from the University of South Carolina Law School, and family grew up on a large farm here in Lexington, and we got into the development business to remove family debt that we had accumulated over the years. While we were developing Rose Lake, which was the first executive development in Lexington, and still one of the nicest developments in Lexington, I realized I needed my real estate license. So I started Southern Visions 40 years ago. Since then, we've done 2 million square feet in commercial property and over 3,000 residential lots. And I can't even add up the number of houses and lots that we've sold. Had wonderful people work for me all those years, have a great team today, and we're still doing the same things that I was doing 20 years ago, just in a different form and fashion. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a county council that's been influenced by Facebook. They call themselves the Blue Shirts, or Develop Lexington Responsibility. A lot of good things they're pushing, a lot of unintended consequences of what they've done. All of the overlay districts are they want to stop growth. That's not going to happen in Lexington. We have the best school system in the state. We got where everybody wants to live. We pull about 1,000 permits a year on new family home construction. That's been going on for the last 15 or 20 years. We will pull that every year, no matter what kind of ordinance is on the books. The national developers now pull 80% of those permits. When I started this process, 50% of those permits were mobile homes. Lexington County was actually the #1 mobile home permit pulling county in the country, which was not a great thing. And 50% were people who bought lots and built houses. We changed to where the nationals came, and what's brought out an awful lot of folks in opposition to what the nationals do in Lexington County.
Well, one of the things that Gregory brought up was that them decreasing the density is actually adding to the sprawl. So the new central overlay district, one of the objectives is stop sprawl, but in fact the rules, are they increasing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious when you have 4 units per acre max on a townhome project that now apparently can't be accessed via a 4-lane road is essentially counterintuitive to a goal, right? So ultimately, if you want to prevent sprawl, you want to essentially push density towards maybe more of the urban core. So whether that's the town or whether that's kind of just outside of the town, I think there are situations where townhomes are incredibly important. And I think you have to look at land drives the cost of homes. So obviously the more dense a project is, the more affordable a product is. And ultimately what you're doing is you're pushing people out and making it less affordable. And then you're creating larger neighborhoods with less density further out and further out and further out. So what you have is the general urban sprawl that you see across Atlanta, Charlotte, New York. I mean, we're just essentially exacerbating it, whether it's the anti-apartment mandate or it's anti-townhome. So I do think you really have to be careful with what you wish for. And I think politics should play a role, but at the end of the day, you have to have careful planning. And you can do townhome projects or apartment projects that are incredibly well done and thoughtful. But as it stands today, with this new central overlay district, you're sort of putting the brakes on intelligent development.
Right, and I think we were meeting with a family, doing family planning with them. They have a large landowner in Lexington, and I mean, we've discovered that one of their tracts is now worth, I mean, how much did it drop in value, do you think?
I mean, theoretically, it drops half in value, or perhaps more. So you've got landowners and heirs and individuals that, their wealth theoretically on paper drops 50% overnight. And that I don't think is an American thing. I think people have a right to their property and its value. And zoning changes that are done without the guise of public input they're essentially very detrimental to the growth of a county, and not just residential growth, but job growth, factory growth, all those things that bring all the other things that people want, which is amenities. So it's unintended consequences that have a good intention. It's just you have to think before you shoot from the hip.
Yeah. And some perfect examples of unintended consequences. Let's use a good example. At the intersection of the dam and Highway 6, there are 5 really nice apartment complexes there. Well, some of the council members thought that that was going to cause traffic, crime, congestion, overloading of the schools, and probably was an impetus for the first overlay district, the Lake Murray overlay district they put in place 3 or 4 years ago. Well, here we are 5 years later, and those are great projects. They've brought a huge amount of tax dollars to the county coffers. It has not caused crime. It has not caused traffic congestion. But if you took those 1,200 families, and put them in a neighborhood, all you have to go do is go look west of Lexington toward Gilbert, and you will see what urban sprawl is. And in the overlay district now, apartments basically are not allowed in Lexington County. They've drafted the ordinance to a way where they have to be a certain distance from an interstate and on a 4-lane highway. Well, all of that property is fully developed. There is nowhere to put an apartment project. And when you do that, all you do is create what we've created on Highway 1 toward Gilbert, which is urban sprawl. Now, one of the things we hadn't talked about is you listen to our leaders, and what they want, which I find kind of funny, is the kind of neighborhoods that I did 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, the Carriage Hills, the Spence Plantations, all of those neighborhoods that have trees in them, that are very easy to get around in, very curvy, don't have straight streetscapes. Another example of unintended consequences is when they put these rules in place, they didn't communicate with Public Works, and Public Works, who reviews our plans, requires all of our neighborhoods to be built to a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit and tangents in the curves. So you take a Saluda River Club, a Spence Plantation, a Carriage Hill Lakes, if we turn those plans in today, they would not be approved. So what do you get? I mean, I hate to keep harping on Highway 1 in Gilbert, but right out there and look at the neighborhoods. You get Fort Jackson built on steroids. You know, neighborhoods where the roads are straight. You can just look straight down it and see nothing but cars and garages.
Right.
It's not what developed Lexington responsible want.
So actually the rules put in place are now causing more problems and probably making it even harder to get what they wanted.
They are, and the folks who are doing this don't understand that. I mean, that's the sad part about it, is that they're continuing to put stricter rules in place.
All right, we're talking about all the growth that is going into West Lexington. We're having a lot of retailers, big box stores coming to the market. They're all looking. Can y'all talk about any of the things going on in the West Lexington area by the high school and 378 number 1?
The growth is a natural reaction to the residential growth growing in that direction. It's obvious the Target already under construction on Highway 1 just north of the high school. Every user that you can think of, from Whataburger to Chipotle, Chick-fil-A, are going to all land in front of that particular project. You got the Walmart Supercenter trying to be in the marketplace. It looks like they're going to drop across the street from the high school. That's still not a done deal, but they've put a lot of money in it to get to where they are. You have 2 major grocery chains that we know of, Kroger and Food Line, that want to be in that market. And all the others are going to follow right behind. So you will see that quadrant become the west commercial hub for Lexington.
And I think with that, the irony is that, you know, with those big retailers coming, our ordinances don't allow for apartments or higher density housing now. And it really doesn't make sense for you to have a commercial node without high density housing. You know, I think when you think of a town, you've got to have the populations near those centers that aren't spread out miles and miles away. So it's really counterintuitive to have these great retailers that aren't served by a larger head count. So at the end of the day, if you're worried about traffic and sprawl, then you've got to have density within these new commercial nodes. And so it can be done correctly. It can be planned correctly. They can be designed correctly. You can have amenities and things that you're proud of. I mean, a Class A apartment doesn't really exist in Lexington, but I can assure you that a Class A apartment developer would love to go next to a major big box retailer and all these new amenities.
Right.
And again, you have to think there's not that, it's easier traffic flow in the 378 corridor, Highway 1 corridor in West Lexington. So traffic really isn't an issue because you've got large roadways with lots of places to go. You're going to have an interchange at Cox Ferry. So I do think ultimately with these new commercial users, you've got to think about residential growth just outside of the 4 units an acre, perhaps 2. It just doesn't cut it. So I think we have to have a thoughtful discussion internally with not only people that don't want growth, but also landowners. And I think landowners their voice is quiet. And we worry about that for a lot of our clients.
Well, a lot of large landowners we've met with, now that the Cox Ferry interchange appears to, it's going to happen, just talking with them and talking about how they can divide up their property between their heirs or how they can family plan, or maybe it's not the best idea for them to sell their land. Maybe they should do a ground lease or something like that. Can y'all talk to some of the discussions you've had recently?
Yeah, we meet with families all the time. After doing this for 40 years, that's a great thing, because if you let the patriarch or the matriarch die, and then you have the family have to split the property up by the will, always ends up being a family fight. So when a family comes in here and we start meeting with them, we love to see them plan ahead of time. But they get an education like we're doing right now and learn about what's going on and what the consequences are. And 5 years ago, when a family would have come in here, they would have had the option to put apartments on their property. They would have had the options to do a high density project. They would have had a lot more options than they have today. Unfortunately, the vast majority, and we'll stay on west of Lexington, the vast majority of land west of Lexington, they have one option: 2 residential units an acre. That impacts the value and impacts their planning, because a lot of the landowners see a piece of property sell for $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000, and they think their property's worth $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. And it's not when it's limited to 2 residential units an acre. Right. Now, the positive side of that is because Lexington is growing so much, we are catching up with land values in Charleston and in Greenville. And residential tracts that have water and sewer available to them, reasonable topography, are now worth values that none of us would have ever thought would have been achieved 5 years ago.
Right, we're seeing a lot of farmers trade in their land, because inputs are really high, commodity prices are low, but the land has doubled or tripled in value. And they're trading in that land and then moving further out and capitalizing on what they can get now.
That's right, farmers or landowners.
Right.
Both.
One of the ones that Gregory and I have under contract, the comps didn't do it any justice. The comps would have put it at $550. We list it for much higher than that, and people flying on their helicopter from Greenville to check it out, land on the site. And it's under contract for much more than what you would think it would be based on comps. And we know how to price it, knowing the activity, the developers, the people coming into the market. And we also know that we were able to advise them, hey, there's 3,500 homes coming 1,000 feet away. That's why this property is valuable.
Right. I think we stay kind of at the pulse of what's going, so we can essentially guide a landowner into knowing where the value is. And what we try to do at Southern Visions is push boundaries. We understand that it appears that land values aren't going down in this market because the demand's so high. So we don't look at a comp backwards. We look at more or less like a forward comp, a theoretical comp. And we've been able to push values, and that's really what we're able to do probably better than most, is theoretically say, well, this is probably worth a good bit more than what the comps show, and let's push the market. And I think ultimately that helps the landowner and puts more money in our client's pocket. So.
And then like the people that have hard corners where there's multiple, lanes of traffic coming together, they might not even want to sell. They could stay in the deal or get a lease or.
Again, planning is not selling your land. Planning, the first question we ask them is, what are you going to do when you sell the land? And you have to think about that first. But planning can be, you can build a McDonald's. It sounds like it's an impossible thing, but if you have the right team, and we've done lots of these, you could, if it's a McDonald's location, why sell the land to a developer when you can do it yourself? And then, of course, that goes all the way down to Dollar Generals, Enterprise Cars, everything. If you have the right piece of property and the right advisors, you should be developing that piece and maximizing the value.
Would they go get a loan to do that, or like what's that whole process?
It just depends on the family dynamics and what. But I mean, any national credit, you can get a loan and support it and have cash flow and profit. Okay. And what we call future generational wealth. When we do planning for any family, we're trying to plan for 2 and 3 generations down the road with growing future generational wealth. If you're a landowner and you just sell your piece of property and all the kids go buy red Corvettes, you have not done good planning. So Lake Murray. Lake Murray has been very good to Southern Visions. In 1983, we sold the first lot on Lake Murray, and I'm probably wrong on that date, it might be 85 or 86, but we sold the very first lake lot for $100,000. We broke a barrier back then. Come all the way forward to today, and we have sold lake lots for $1 million. It is amazing what's happened with the value on Lake Murray. In 1985, a really nice house on Lake Murray would have sold for $350,000, $400,000. 3 months ago, we sold a house on Lake Murray for $9,250,000. Just unbelievable change. To get there was not easy. Take any of our lake projects, Panorama, Spence, Secret Cove, you can go way back to all of those. When we started those projects, we were selling lake lots that were way more than the comp. So we were setting the new values on the lake. And we still do that today. Gregory has a great project called Clement Point.
Yeah, I mean, I think Clement Point is kind of our last crown jewel. It adjoins Spence Plantation. It's 9 lots. We have a lot under contract in there that essentially is priced at $1.6 million an acre. So we're pushing boundaries there, and then we have architectural controls. So we build nice communities. We're thoughtfully planning them. We bring in the right utilities. So we're able to do things now, which are obviously much smaller scale because of land scarcity. But I think in a few years' time, it won't be uncommon to have most of your new houses in the 4,000 to 6,000 square foot range that are $3.5 to $4 million. I wouldn't see that being out of the norm. Obviously, we would love to have more Spence plantations. There just isn't that much land, so we're sort of shifting our model into smaller, more boutique style neighborhoods. So.
And that was a great project because the landowners, they have a large parcel. They received an offer that sounds great, but you were able to, with what you've done there, you've probably doubled their value.
Yeah, double. Yeah, double. And obviously there's time, and it does take time to get through all this, but even if you account for time, doubling your money over a 3 or 5 year period is much better than just taking 50% of that up front. And again, we guided them, this particular family, through the development process, helped them, essentially they financed all the development. So we just guided them through the process, helped them do everything you've got to do, whether that's put in the roads, put in the utilities, and then obviously design the lots appropriately, size the lots appropriately, and then also design them in a way that prevents certain zoning issues that come in, whether that's a 50-foot buffer. You have to be aware of all these little nuances to basically maximize your lots on Lake Murray. So we're able to do that, and we can do that with anyone on Lake Murray if they're interested. So
Clement Point is a good example of family planning. When the matriarch passed away, that family would have never known to go and get an appraisal that reflected today's values on what that piece of property would be worth if it was divided up into 9 lots. So their sales today are tax-free because we got an appraisal at her death, and stepped up basis. So when they make a sale, they pay no tax. You can't do that unless you get the family at an early stage and do the planning.
Right.
And saving all that tax has probably saved how many? Just
Millions and millions.
Millions and millions.
Right.
Again, they had a $5.5 million offer
Around
to
that.
sell the land in a raw state. And this is the last piece of property the family owned. They didn't want to leave any money on the table. So we developed it into 9 lots, and they will get significantly more money.
Yeah, I assume we'll be somewhere around double that value, which is pushing $10 million, which is good for 9 lots.
Yeah. And that all sounds easy, but it's not. The amount of navigating through all the new rules that are in place to make this work takes a lot.
Yeah, I think we're probably 2 years in from start to finish today to get to where we're almost able to convey lots. It's not a fast process in the county, unfortunately, and you just kind of have to get on the slow ride. And we're trying in this background to expedite the way the county operates and help guide them on perhaps being more efficient, because again, everything now is quite slow. So in an ideal world, we're trying to speed that up. And again, these are larger or nicer lots, and I think that is what people want in the county. So we're not afraid of doing big lot minor subdivisions, whether that's on the lake or outside of the lake. And I know that's what council wants. So, if you've got a 20-acre piece of property, you're not selling that to a national. So you're able to divide that in 9 lots, and you can generate a lot of value that way without having to put in significant infrastructure. And that actually is what a few people on the council really want. And I don't disagree with that. I think there is a place for nice homes on large lots, especially if the overall tract is not, greater, let's say, than 30 acres. So.
Right. And then a great thing y'all did with Clement Point was, I think you made it advantageous for a custom builder that you work with to go build something there, and now you're going to set the market again.
Right.
You set the market with the lots. Now you're going to set the market with the house, and it's that first domino to fall. Right. So there's a 3-year process to this whole thing that y'all played out very well.
Right. And again, we're navigating this in a difficult time. So you've got high interest rates and a challenging economy, and so we were able to sort of talk our sellers through that and say, look, this is what we would recommend to make this project successful. And I do think, rates are a sticky subject, but, I personally don't see them coming down. So you have to figure out a way to market those lots, in a more aggressive manner. And we're doing all the things that you really need to do to push in a difficult market when it comes to interest rates. Right. But that doesn't stop growth. It's going to slow down the number of buyers you're going to have. If interest rates were 3%, I think we would have probably sold 7 of the lots. So it does make it challenging, but at the same time, that's just the reality of real estate today.
Family Land Planning 101. After doing this for 40 years, the number one rule in family land planning is do it during your lifetime. Don't do a will and expect the children to follow your wishes. It's going to always go sideways. There's going to always be different opinions of what people want to do. So try to do it in your lifetime. So what happens when you have a family that's ready to do some family planning today? They have a large piece of property and they want to sell it so they can move money to children or grandchildren. That requires very sophisticated planning, because typically the parents probably inherited this piece of property or bought it a long time ago and have no basis in it. So if they sell to a national developer for $50,000 an acre, so we got a 100-acre tract, that's $5 million, they will pay, by the time the dust settles, between $1.5 million and $2 million in tax. As soon as you tell somebody they're going to pay $1.5 million to $2 million in tax, they sort of turn off. That's not what they want to do. So we're going to have a much more complicated transaction. And there are lots of tools out there to make those kind of deals work. The simplest and most common one is 1031 tax-free exchange. We've probably been involved in, I'd say 100, but it's probably closer to 200 200 tax-free exchanges. So we've seen every different variety and model. It could be one as simple as the family wants a beach house. So we're going to sell their land and swap into a beach house. And then to meet the rules of the 1031, they have to turn back around and rent that beach house out as an investment property and then use it personal property very carefully and need to understand those rules. If converting it to cash is a little harder, but there are ways to do that. You can buy a McDonald's, you can buy any kind of income, triple credit, triple A credit tenant, like a McDonald's, like a Dollar General, something like that. And when you buy it, you've created the monthly cash flow from the rent. But what if a grandchild needs $100,000 to buy a house? Well, you can go back and borrow against that asset tax-free and distribute that cash. So if you buy a $2 million Dollar General and borrow $1 million, you now have $1 million in cash to give to the children who need cash. The Dollar General pays the note on the mortgage, and there probably should be cash flow above that. I've done that technique many, many times, and complicated, but we've done it. We pull in their lawyer, their accountant, all their professionals to make sure that it's done right, but it can be done, and it's a very common practice today. Just recently finished a deal with Doug. I don't know whether the Perrimans did an exchange or not.
I'm not sure, but that was a tough deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, one of the great things I think about it is you take that $5 million piece of land and then you convert that into $350,000, $400,000 in revenue per year for the family, and they're getting the depreciation against that. They're not paying as much taxes, and that's going to all flow to the next generations. Kind of set them up for success.
Right. Anytime we're doing family planning, you hear me use the term generational wealth. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We want the next generation to have higher wealth than the current generation. And it takes planning, and it takes smart decisions. And what I call the red Corvette theory doesn't work very well in that. And somebody has to deliver that message. And parents sometimes aren't as good as us as real estate advisors. You can't invest in a red Corvette and create generational wealth.
Speaking of family planning, we just helped with an individual that was in a probate case. You know, there was some family planning beforehand. They had a trust set up, and this individual was part of that trust and wanted out. And this trust owned over 800 acres, several rental properties, and we were able to structure a deal that kind of was able to remove him from the situation. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think this individual was kind of in a familial tiff, let's put it that way. And we were able to navigate him out of that with the help of attorneys on both sides of this argument. And we were able to bring him a buyer for those assets, and he was able to purchase, basically, our buyer was able to purchase 1/3 undivided interest of the entire trust, and he was able to put a number on the table that got this individual out of the middle of this familial tiff. I think when we got into this particular transaction, I assumed this would take us years and years and years. And we were able to navigate it probably in less than 4 or 5 months. So this individual now is free from that argument, free from bankruptcy. And it's changed his life. And I do think Southern Visions is able to not only navigate simple transactions where you sell something for $5 and you go buy a Dollar General, but we can also work on complex, more sensitive subjects. So legal issues and familial challenges. So we're not only able to navigate the fun side of real estate, but also the difficult and sometimes sad side of real estate. And that's something we had kind of a multifaceted approach. So any kind of problem you have, I think we're able to advise you and hopefully get to an end goal where everyone's happy again.
So a lot of families or landowners have a piece of property that can be used for many different uses. And for a typical residential broker, that's very difficult. For a typical commercial broker, that's very difficult to handle. With our experience over 40 years, we're very capable of handling a piece like that. Angela Cash, really up and coming realtor in the office, has a really interesting piece on Highway 1 in West Columbia. The growth in West Columbia is amazing. It's right there at City of Columbia, near the university. That particular project will have high-end commercial on the front of it, and in the back of it will be apartments or high-density residential. Those are two different users. That they have the choice. They can sell to a developer from Charlotte who will come do the commercial on the front and peel the residential off the back. But when they do that, they leave a lot of money on the table. So for this particular landowner, Angela is helping them negotiate a high-density residential project in the back, and we're putting commercial in the front with your typical Whataburger, Advanced Auto type commercial users on the front. Very few people have the knowledge or experience or contacts being the biggest one, to handle that many different uses going on one piece of property.
And I think that leads into a big thing with, real estate being a team sport. I see a lot of different people coming into the office or that we work with, everything from site guys all the way to leasing companies, tenant reps. Can you talk about some of the people that we partner with in this office?
Reggie in our office does all the relo work for Dollar General in 3 states. We do for 4 different banks. We do the foreclosure work for 4 banks. That includes going in and investigating the properties ahead of time and advising the banks on whether they should foreclose or whether they should try to work something out with the work something out with the debtor.
Yeah, I think the overall goal here is just to let the general public in this market in the Midlands understand that we're not just selling houses. We're developing, we're doing residential development, commercial development. We're able to advise banks, we're able to advise the school district. I think that's something that we're trying to get out there for people to understand, that we're more of like a Swiss Army knife. We're not just your typical singular butter knife. We've got a lot of capabilities. And if you have any issues or any challenges or any questions, just come in, give us a ring. I think that's something that we haven't done a great job of getting out there, but we're starting now.
Yeah, all of my residential agents would be mad if they saw this video if we didn't emphasize that we sell a lot of residential houses. I was at my sister's birthday party the other day on Blossom Street in Columbia, riding down Columbia, surrounded by all the big Columbia real estate companies. And Reggie has a Southern Vision sign on one side of the street, and Ann has a Southern Vision sign on the other side of the street in downtown Columbia. We have 3 or 4 other residential listings coming up there. Of course, on Lake Murray, we dominate the high dollar house market. I know we've done the 2 highest sales this year on the lake. We probably have a couple of the highest listings right now. And it keeps going on and on and on. So Gregory mentioned that right now, Clement Point's our crown jewel. Clement Point will have lot sales in there above $1 million. And by the time the dust settles, we'll probably have total package of $4 to $5 million on some of the houses. Kind of amazing. 10 years ago, to break the $1 million barrier for the sale of a house happened rarely. I mean, today it's $3 million is the new barrier, and it doesn't happen rarely. It happens all the time. We have a new project coming down the pike that just takes all of this to a new level. We will be selling, we already have an offer on the table for the first lot for $3 million. It's going to be restricted to the point where you have to use a certain architect and a certain builder. Total package on that project today is probably, if you're not spending $6, $7, $8 million, you're not going to be in this neighborhood. By the time we do this project, it's going to probably be higher than that. The first house in the project is probably a $15 million to $20 million house. They will have a $1 million structured garden in their yard. So it's amazing what's happening on Lake Murray. It's exciting.
Right. It's almost like it's
And this is a second home. So, I mean, we're attracting the Columbia people that never came here 20 years ago. And they bring things that we've never seen. And it's exciting and it's proud to be involved with all of that. It's frustrating to see county council and other people put ordinances and rules in place that are trying to stop it. I won't go into detail on this particular project, but we had some major hurdles to get a $10 million project on the books. Makes no sense.
right. I mean, in a way, it's like this would be Kiowa, let's say 15 years ago or 10 years ago, but in theory, those are Kiowa numbers. So you would want, especially if it's a second home, I mean, imagine the tax revenue on a second home at $15 million. I think off the top of my head, that's
450,000.
That's 450 grand. So that's the equivalent of, let's say, 30 normal houses as a primary residence. So you're not having urban sprawl. You're having something that, you know, brings more wealth to the county, more influence, and more spotlight. You know, again, these are things you would think you would want, but we understand that people just don't want development at all, and that's fine. But that's just, there's an inevitability of South Carolina is in a lot of ways is kind of similar to Florida in the 80s or 90s, where everyone's coming here. It's cheap. There's a lot of good schools. There's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of jobs. And so the growth isn't going to stop. The question is, yes, you can mitigate certain things you want to, you know, not happen, whether that's save grand trees or have green space. We're not against that at all. In fact, we like that. I think it's just, you know, there's growth. Okay, what do we do? And obviously, if you have draconian or arbitrary rules that aren't logical, it's going to create a lot of blowback, and you've got to be careful with creating negative press about a place that has so much potential. So,
I think the big takeaway from that is they came to the right developers to help solve their problems and get this project pushed through.
right.
This particular project, unfortunately, they got bad advice to start it, and we're having to pretty much wipe the slate clean and start over, and cross our fingers and hope we can convince the county fathers to help us get through the maze of rules that they've put in place.
So I owned a small business for 16 years before I got here, and one of the biggest mistakes we made was not buying the building that we were renting. And now one of my passions is to actually help small business owners get into a building that they own. And just when you compare the two, you know, $3,000 a month in rent versus a $500,000 building, you can put $10,000 extra in your pocket as the owner of the building, plus capture the depreciation, plus capture the appreciation. And that's turned into one of the things that I like to do is help advise small business owners on how they can generate wealth through owning the building, and maybe it's in a holding company, et cetera, but there's different ways that they can increase the value of their business by doing that. And then that also leads to the fact that we have a business broker that works here that can also help people with selling an HVAC business and then maybe keeping the building and renting it back to the HVAC business. Just wanted any of the deals that y'all seen go through here like that.
Well, owning real estate is the number one driver of generational wealth. And everybody should have that as one of their main goals, is to create generational wealth. And whether you're on the commercial side or the residential side, you should really have a plan of trying to put real estate in your portfolio every year. I can remember as a kid, my father, his first rule and his first goal for all of us was for us to own our house. So I owned a $35,000 condominium in Harborside. But that started, you know, and eventually I sold that $35,000 condo at Harborside and built my first lake house from the proceeds of that sale. And that started generational wealth in my family. Every family from the top down should focus on owning a house, owning a business, owning commercial real estate. 30 or 40 years ago, I went to the National Home Builders meeting and I met a family very similar to ours that had a farm, and he taught me something that's applied in my life and we apply in all of our clients' lives today, is you really want to try to do an income producing property every 1 to 2 years and put in your family portfolio. It doesn't have to be you individually. You can do it as a group, as a family. And over the last 40 years, my family has built shopping centers, you name it, we've built it, and it's now in a family portfolio. And we've created generational wealth. We're down to where the third generation gets a check every 6 months. Some of them don't really know where it's from, so we hadn't done a good job of teaching them about generational wealth. But that's what happens. And so Doug's example of a HVAC owner renting his building and not owning it is a perfect example. Come see us. We will help you own your building and take the first step in generational wealth. Get your kids in a house that they own. Figure it out. It's not that hard. All of the products out there on the residential side is amazing. First-time buyers, there's so many governmental programs that help the person buy the house for the first time. Why aren't you using it? My guess is you're not using it because somebody hadn't advised you about all those products and helped you acquire a house for a child or a grandchild or a great-grandchild.
Yeah, a great example was one of the listings that's downtown. It's an Airbnb with an ADU in the back, and they both can generate around $80,000 a year in revenue. And then if it's a short-term rental, now you can deduct that from your active income. So there's all kind of tricks like that that are actually written into the tax code because it's what the government wants, and if you do those things, you'll be incentivized to do it. And there's things like that that help keep the ball rolling to get to your next property.
Right, which is why consensus-wise, everybody will agree that owning real estate, commercial or residential, creates generational wealth. And I don't know a single family that doesn't do planning that wants to have generational wealth.
So after joining Southern Visions, then started working with my sphere of influence to help, to see who I could help and what was out there and what needed to be done. And I reached out to a person that was referred to me. And this was a project that he built phase 1 and phase 2 of a neighborhood, and phase 3 never got off the ground. 2009 hit, all the custom home builders dissipated. There's nothing but nationals left. He was dealing with the town of Blythewood, which had a severe set of restrictions on what could be built there. But anyway, we were able to take this 41-acre tract from an expired listing to under contract with a national home builder to now we've closed on it. And luckily, Robby and the team here was able to assist me kind of get that one across the finish line.
Yeah, and that's a good example of us knowing the players. There are 10 national builders out there who are your typical buyers. 9 of those 10 would have never gotten this particular deal to the finish line. We knew the right builder who was going to be able to navigate the public hearings, all the things that they had to go through, all of the unhappy neighbors in the first 3 phases who liked having a national park as their backyard, who were trying to stop this project. And it's more than just knowing the basics. You got to know the players, and you got to know the capability of the players. And when Doug brought this one to me, it was very obvious who the right buyer was. And 9 months later, they closed. A typical close period for a national builder going through the kind of issues that they face today, and I'm going to say this, and I know I'm wrong, but the typical period today's 2 years. In reality, it's probably 3. And we got that transaction closed in 9 months because we picked the right builder. Right. And he was willing to take some risk and willing to close without being fully permitted, which is very unusual in our marketplace.
And they typically, they want to wait till permits because they can force appreciation into the property, which is going to justify the price at the end of the road.
That's right.
But in this case, it just behooves them to go ahead and move it.
Yeah, we don't really say this out loud because we need all of the national builders. But you always have to remember they're big corporations and they don't have a heart. It's all about the bottom dollar. And most landowners get crushed by them because they don't understand that. They'll end up signing a contract that says they'll close when they get permits, which is typical in these contracts, but they didn't put in a stop date on a closing. And 5 years later, their piece of property is still tied up. The value of their property's doubled, but the national has it under contract for half that value because it's appreciated over time, and they just didn't have good advice.
That's another benefit working with us is you're not going to get it tied up by a middleman. That's his only goal is to flip it, right? We're going direct to the source, direct to the builders, working directly with engineers.
Yeah. We probably do 15 transactions, maybe 20 transactions a year with the national builders. So we understand their limitations and their capabilities. And you need that. And a lot of people will just go and sign one of these contracts with a national without getting advice. And you ask them after the deal's taken place, they wish they would have had somebody with some expertise to help them.
And those look a little bit different than a regular NAR contract, right?
That's right. Yeah, they're 80-page contracts.
Then another farmer we just helped, one of the largest farmers in the county, needed to disposition some land, and we're working with a regional builder that was able to come in at a record high price in this area and actually get the deal done and in the terms and the amount of time that they want to get it done. And I just think that's important to emphasize that you can get a higher price if you wait on permits and allow the builder to build more appreciation into it. You need to have stop gaps and exit clauses and things like that to help you keep the builder on track, or you can take a little bit less of a value and they can close sooner.
Right. And so that's rare, but we do have specific builders that we work with that are looking for property that they're able to essentially pull the trigger on. And those are rare cases, but there are builders willing to go and basically do as much due diligence as they can and then say, look, I think I can get this to permit. There's obviously risks there, but in this particular case, the property was well graded, and I do think there's a lot of value there. So every situation is different. We look at everything from a very macro level, then we get micro. But again, having the right advisors, having the right people with experience getting to the finish line will protect you and your family from pitfalls that you may not be aware of. So.
One of the really benefits of coming to Southern Visions is you working with Doug or you're working with Gregory, but that's really not true. When you come to Southern Visions, you get the other expertise we have in the office. Everybody pitches in and helps everybody on a deal. We could be doing a deal in Blythewood and Reggie or Rhett knows the chairman of the planning commission. All of those kind of little things are really important and unusual in a real estate company, because most real estate companies, people come in, close their door, don't tell anybody about their deal.
If they come in at all.
Yeah, if they come in at all, and hope they get to the closing.
So a couple of weeks ago, Doug came to me with the idea of putting together a fund, and he said, well, we're going to do it's a customizable fund. And I said, well, what does that mean exactly? And we are looking at a specific platform which allows us to essentially customize real estate deals with different investors. And there's actually an online portal, and it will allow investors to sort of put money in specific deals that we're in. Because oftentimes in this office, we will have deals that someone in the office will be doing, or another principal outside of the office, or a friend or a family member. And you've got to go and you've got to start that LLC. You've got to send out K-1s every year. It becomes a very cumbersome process. So with this new fund, we'll be able to have a specific deal, a specific idea, whether that's light industrial, value add. So we go buy an older building, we fix it up, we tenant it up, we bring value to that property. And then those investors who put money in that specific deal will make money on that deal. I think at the same time, under that same fund, we could do, let's say we have a subdivision or a landowner, and we will essentially partner with that landowner, or other investors could put money in. So there's a lot of flexibility in it. And I think Doug has probably a better grasp on the complexities of the fund, but we're excited about it. So I wanted to talk about that and where we're headed with the fund.
Yeah, and you hit all the points there. I think the deal flow in this office is pretty amazing, right. And it gets pretty cumbersome setting up an LLC for every deal. And we have a lot of investors reach out to us wanting to invest in deals, And there's a lot of things that we can do together, like the subdivisions where we're partnering with a landowner and we might bring an investor in to help put all the site work.
Right.
Or we're actually going to be a GP in the deal with them. There's also the light industrial, flex space, either value add, build ground up, et cetera. So there's a lot of different deal flow coming through the office, and instead of going, each one individually one by one, we'll set up a customizable fund that will allow an investor to go into the portal, pick which deal they want to invest in, or if they want to invest in a pool of deals, say we're doing tax sale or something like that, and or a multifamily fund. It can all be under the same umbrella. People can diversify their real estate holdings, capture the benefits of depreciation against the assets and the income. Typically what we look for is a 2x multiple and at least an 18% internal rate of return. And that'll more or less be the guideline for the things that go into the fund and how we set it up.
Right, and I think that kind of brings us into our next topic is, we're constantly looking for things, whether we're using AI texting or mailers or cold calling. But I mean, if anyone out there or anyone that's listening has an idea of a deal or something that they may own, please come to us, because real estate is impossible to stay on top of. We often joke like, how did we miss that? Or I didn't know that was on the market, because the amount of things that go on the market or on or off the market or things we don't hear about is immense. And
Right.
so...
And we've traded several deals off market that,
Right.
MLS is not going to capture.
Right.
A lot of deals come through here that never are
Right.
publicized.
And that's a good deal is oftentimes a deal that isn't on Crexi or LoopNet or MLS, or it's coming from either us tracking it down, finding an owner who's willing to sell at a reasonable fair market value, not unreasonable, and that's oftentimes when things get listed, especially in this market. There's a lot of things that are overpriced. So anything that anyone has that, let's say you own a 6,000 square foot beat up, warehouse, we could split it into 3 different bays. We could add, 3 different power phases in there, and then or 3 meters, excuse me. And then we're able to split that up, essentially increase that rent and increase that value. And, you can make a lot of money doing that.
And then that building goes from $5 a square foot to 12, 15, maybe sometimes $20 a square foot, and we just tripled the value of the building.
Right.
So those are some great things that we can do, where we can partner with people that own assets that maybe that have been neglected. So I think the great thing about the fund, like I said, a lot of deal flow that comes through here. There's a lot of GPs in this office that are experts in real estate that'll help guide the process. And this will be a place where investors can diversify their portfolio, their income, capture depreciation. Looking for accredited investors. If you don't know what that means, reach out to me and we'll go through it.
No, what I was saying with the fund, it allows us to, essentially we're going to start with proof of concept, right? So we'll do something where we go into that deal, it's profitable, and we know that theoretically it's going to be successful. Obviously real estate things can go sideways, but that's not what our goal is with starting a fund. We wouldn't do it if we didn't have the confidence that it was going to be a profitable endeavor. And then as we grow it, we'll be able to expand our project size and scale to hopefully do things that, let's say we do a 30,000 square foot strip center ground up, or do value add strip center, or something that has maybe a 10 or 15 or 20 or $30 million price tag. But initially we're going to start small, because that's our bread and butter. Is you don't have to hit a home run to make money. It's about the number of deals you're doing. And oftentimes a big deal, they're slower, they're more cumbersome. You can make just as much money doing 3 or 4 deals at 3 or 4 million as you could doing that one big $30 million deal. So,
well, and I think a good example is, you talked about the strip center. So there's an old strip center that y'all are buying that you can take it through the whole process of, redoing the parking lot, the roof, the HVAC, all of that, then increase the rents. So if somebody invested in that initially when it's a $5 million deal, and then by the time you get done raising the rents and adding value to the property, forcing appreciation into it, now it's worth $8 million, you go refinance, the investors are going to get all their capital back, or most of it, and then still receive the cash flow from the tenants. So there's just some great ways that this fund is going to help people, like I said, diversify their income and capture depreciation and the tax benefits of investing in real estate.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about this fund is at first it's going to be pretty hyper local, and we're experts. We look at every deal through the lens of, okay, is this a great location? Do we see this area of town changing? Does this deal make sense? So we're not going out and putting a fund together outside of our sphere of influence or our area of expertise. And as things grow, that perhaps that thesis will change. But I think ultimately we're fairly local to the Midlands and South Carolina, so we keep it in the South Carolina realm and work from there. And so that's important to know, that we're not just putting together a deal that we really don't know what's going on, or we don't know the local market or the zoning regs or the mayors or whatever there may be in that particular deal. So we're excited.
Yep, excited to do it. And then going back to being local, having the right contractors, the right site guys, all these things that have been built over the last 40 years here, and now starting to incorporate them into deals that other people can invest in, I think carries a lot of value for them. And having GPs in the deal that have done this for a long time, they're putting their capital on the line as well.
Right.
I think you'll know it's a good deal when we bring it to market.
Right. I mean, we don't like to do deals that we lose money on, and I think no one does, right? But ultimately, there's nothing I'm going to put out there in this fund that I'm not confident on. And so we look forward to doing it, and it'll take some time to set up, and we'll find the right deal and we'll start. It's the first domino, and we're excited for it to fall.